So tell us about your journey. How did you know you wanted to be a doctor and that this whole path was really your calling?
You know, I always say it was an accidental journey. I don't think anything was super intentional until maybe more recently. But the whole point or path of being a doctor really began when I was a child. And we took a trip to India. My parents are Indian. And we went to Calcutta, which is a very busy, bustling city in India. And I just remember being stunned. And I remember, literally getting up from the airport all the way into the city, just looking around. It was my first trip there that I could remember, and just being shocked, stunned, the poverty, the people, the noise, the colors, the smells. It was just overwhelming. And there's so many things I remember from that trip, from meeting my family for the first time, our extended family, to, trying to speak Hindi in the most terrible way you can possibly imagine and all this other stuff. But the thing that stuck for years later was just people on the street that were hurt. They looked like they needed care. And something in me at that age, I was 10, and it was just like, I want to help people. I want to do something. So it's very naive. Everyone walks around saying they want to help people and they want to do something. Stuck as I went through high school and then as I got into college. And in college I had doubts, and I had moments where I'm like, I'm not sure if medicine is for me. I love science, I love chemistry, I love thinking through all of that, but I also love writing and I love speaking, and I was thinking maybe more journalism, maybe that's the way to go. And at the end of the day, I chose medicine and embarked on that path and that journey, which consumed me, quite honestly, and left journalism behind, left writing behind, didn't read a book, didn't write, didn't do anything for years. And it's just funny how life works out. Journalism found me again. So that was sort of the path to becoming a doctor and to entering this field.
Absolutely. That's so interesting. And not only are you a doctor, but you've really, in a profound way, combined Western medicine with Eastern medicine. So can you talk a little bit about what guided you to not just, do the traditional medical route, but explore this whole other world that may not be as familiar to most people?
Yes, so that also is an accidental journey. I never intended to jump into the world of Eastern medicine or integrative medicine. I was a hardcore doctor, quite honestly. I loved procedures, I loved adrenaline, I wanted to be an ICU doctor. I interviewed across the country for ICU fellowships, and the only reason I detoured from that was there was a lot of stuff going on in our family back in Atlanta, and I was like, I really need to be home for a year or two, settle all that stuff down, let me go back to Atlanta, and I took a job in urgent care. And so from urgent care, I got recruited into the emergency room. And the emergency room, again, is high adrenaline, right? You're doing everything, you're seeing everything, you're doing procedures, and you see everything under the sun, and you meet every type of person under the sun. So I liked it. I actually really loved it. So that's the type of doctor I was. But unfortunately, the years of medical school, the years of ER work were taking a toll, and I didn't even realize it. I wasn't even conscious or aware of it. I was completely, disconnected from what was happening with me. I was more interested in kind of what I was accomplishing or what I was doing. And this kind of silent whispers that I always talk about, like you don't feel quite right, your joints are hurting a little bit, you're starting to gain weight, and you can't really explain it. Everything that was kind of just very silent, kind of murmuring under the surface for years, started to crescendo to the point where I was losing hair. It was noticeable. I was gaining a significant amount of weight. I had terrible acne. I didn't feel good. I would get dressed in the dark because I was just so embarrassed to try to put myself together. And then I still didn't connect. That something was wrong and I needed to do something. It's just I was so in my head most of the time. And it was finally a couple of things. It was my mom, who was really proud of my original Indian hair because I had the best hair in the family, and was absolutely devastated that now half of it was gone. And it was my now husband, who we were dating at the time, who was just like, something's wrong with you. You need to get checked out. He goes, I don't care, but I feel like something's wrong. It was my patients, because the ER at some point is still primary care nowadays, right? So there were patients that would come in and had seen me for a few years, and they were staring up at my scalp. They weren't really looking at me or paying attention to me. And so it was kind of those three things that motivated me to start this journey of trying to understand what was happening with my health, what did I need to do. And that began my journey for finding answers And that journey didn't go really well. It, was so frustrating, and, not to jump ahead, but I've, to deal with my mother-in-law right now who has a new diagnosis of cancer. I'm back in that conventional medicine world, and that journey hasn't changed for people. It's just as hellish as I remember it being. And I went from doctor to doctor trying to get answers, trying to get solutions, and didn't really get anywhere. Went to the quote-unquote best doctors in the city, was willing to travel to get answers, nothing. And then finally got put on a medication that one of the side effects of the medication was that it dropped my blood pressure. Now, I'm telling the story not just to tell you what happened to me, but also to explain how disconnected I was, and I was a physician, right? So I'm put on this medication. I'm following what I was told to do. I'm not paying attention or digging into the fact that, this might drop my blood pressure. My blood pressure's already low. Shame on me for that, right? I already have this knowledge. So anyhow, my blood pressure dropped dramatically one day while I was driving, and so I got into a wreck. I could have hit somebody else. I could have hit another car. I could have died. And so that was sort of just the jolt to like, like, what am I doing, And so that began a search for answers. That began going home that day and being like, I've got to figure something else out, and I've got to do it on my own. There's really nobody else who's going to do this for me. There's no prince coming in. There's no magic solution. There's no one pill. So I just started studying. I studied everything I could get my hands on, and it began with a weekend course in holistic medicine, and then that became, wanting to be certified in nutrition, and that became wanting to learn Chinese medicine. So I flew to San Francisco and became a licensed acupuncturist and studied Chinese herbal medicine. I learned about Ayurveda, which was a little bit in my roots, and got reintroduced to that. And then finally did the Integrative Medicine Fellowship with Dr. Weil, which is in Arizona, and so spent 2 years going through that program. And that kind of finally, I finished that program, I think it was 2008. That gave me the confidence to put like all these little pieces I had back together in terms of maybe taking care of somebody else. Now, all the information I had gathered up until that point, I had fixed myself. It took me a good 2 years, but I had fixed myself. But then, it was everybody else asking questions like, well, what'd you do? Well, how did that happen? What was the solution there? What herb would you take? Would you do acupuncture for this? So all those questions, and then finishing the fellowship, that was sort of, the kind of the moment where like, hey, I might have something here. I might be able to help a few people. Right. So that got me into the world of Eastern medicine, integrative medicine, functional medicine, nutrition, all these different fields that you hear about today. But that was my entry into it.
Absolutely. No, really interesting journey. I think wellness is such a buzzword and everywhere, and it's kind of just the new fad. So how do you define wellness, and how do you break down some of those, stereotypes or misconceptions that are out in the media and, in our everyday lives today?
Yeah, I feel like wellness is such a used term now, right? Everybody's talking about wellness. It's in our vernacular, which I think is great. I mean, I think it's fantastic that we've shifted from, disease management to wellness. I think that's a huge, huge accomplishment culturally, so that's fantastic. But wellness means different things to different people, right? And it depends on who you're talking to. I remember him coming from this vantage point and this perspective of having all this different types of training kind of under my belt, including conventional medical training. And so when I sit back and I think about what does wellness mean to me, and what does it mean for my patients or for my center or for anyone that I touch, it's really cumulative, it's additive. There's not one factor that defines wellness. And so it's really the accumulation of a number of different things. And I would start with energy, like where's your energy, if you have good energy, your emotional landscape. I mean, I think the further I get along, it's funny, it's like I know so much chemistry and I know so much physiology, and I'm sure we'll talk about all of that, but the further I get along, it's like I'm understanding how powerful our emotions are, how powerful our sense of connection is. That's a part of wellness too. I think it is chemistry. It's your nutrition, it's your biology, it's your physiology. What's your gut doing? Do you have inflammation? It's all of those things as well. And then it is about community and family and support and spirituality. All of those things define wellness. And that is the reason I think that so many people sit in my exam rooms or my offices or talk to me when I'm out, and they're like, well, I don't understand. I ate this way, I did this, I did that. Why did I get X, Y, and Z? It's because, again, it's cumulative, it's additive. And it can feel overwhelming to try to tackle all of that, but unless we start to sit back and understand that it's all influencing each other. You know, I had an expert tell me recently that a hamburger on vacation is metabolized completely differently than a hamburger when you're stressed out or you might be eating it right now. So I mean, again, it's like it's so cumulative and so additive, and we have to understand how all those pieces come together. And the beauty of Eastern systems of medicine is that they stress that from the get-go. It wasn't just, you know, take this herb. It was like, well, what's the rest of your life doing? And then trying to understand how to put all that together.
Love it. I love it. So, you know, obviously Western medicine hat then, what would be like a hack or something that you know, is a general tip that you could give to some of, you know, our viewers or audiences? I know that, you know, our worlds are so crazy, but if you could do one thing today, what would you suggest doing?
Oh my gosh.
Besides buying SuperWoman Rx.
Yes. Well, I think the first thing I would stress, you know, and it's funny because I think my answers changed over the years, but I think the very first thing I would stress is the importance of being connected to yourself. I think that's the most important thing you can do, to not ignore yourself. I think most people, and most women in particular, ignore the soft and silent whispers that we hear on any given day. They'll ignore the fact that I'm tired more days out of the week than I'm not, you know, or that something's hurting, or that my hair's falling, or this joint's bothering me, or why am I gaining weight or losing weight, either direction, you know, more so than I ever have in the past, or why am I suddenly getting more anxiety or depression? I think we collectively ignore those things, and I think the most important thing before you start any health or wellness journey is to understand how to get connected back to you. I would say that's the first thing. And there's so many different ways to do that. I mean, that's a really big blanket statement, right? Yeah. But it's everything from just adopt one habit that you could do every day. Maybe you journal every morning. Maybe you pray every day. Maybe you meditate. You know, maybe you go for a walk in nature, you know. But whatever it is, have that conversation with yourself in whatever format you want to, because that'll bring you back to yourself. So that would be my first kind of foundational starting point. Then we can keep building from there if you want.
I love it. No, it's great. I mean, you know, Googlers are often high-achieving individuals, are constantly, you know, plugged in, dealing with many different levels of stress. So what do you do to unplug, or any suggestions for when you feel like you're on that brink of burnout, or you feel something coming along, you know, besides getting in touch with yourself, what are some things that maybe you like to do?
I think, you know, it's so easy to get burned out when you're a high achiever because you want to accomplish a lot. I still want to accomplish a lot. I'm far from done. But you have to watch your energy, and you have to watch kind of your boundaries. And I think it's so hard to do because there's always that goal or that next milestone that you're trying to get to or trying to accomplish. So again, I think one of the things in your schedule, put the breaks in. I think you need to put in breaks throughout the day, especially for you guys, right? Because you guys are on technology a lot, and I think that in itself is very draining. We're learning more and more about the effects of that as we get further along. But I think putting those breaks in, I would take 3 10-minute breaks throughout your workday, you know, where you are forced to get up, get away from computers, cell phones, iPads, all that other stuff. You know, maybe walk outside the building for just a little bit, get fresh air. It's amazing how just fresh air and sunlight can shift your energy very quickly. So that's just a quick, easy hack that you can do anywhere. So, you know, those 3 10-minute breaks. I would also strongly advise, you know, this is so easy to do too, but really put in your schedule to block maybe an hour to 2 hours a week to do something that lowers cortisol. So that means, you know, you're not running necessarily, but you're walking, or you're going for a swim, or you're doing yoga, or maybe you're just in nature for a period of time, or go ahead and schedule that massage or acupuncture or something along those lines. Those are ways to recharge, because the biggest problem with high achievers, and I'd be so curious to see what everybody at Google tests out as in the power type plan, but the biggest problem with high achievers is that they never take time out to de-stress. You're in high adrenaline mode all the time. And the problem with high adrenaline is, yes, you get stuff done, but at some point you're going to crash and burn. And that crash and burn comes as maybe mild symptoms. I'm just tired, it's hard to get to work in the morning, to things that are so severe, like I can't move, I'm depressed, or things like that. So you never want to get to that place. So putting those natural breaks in, you know, 10 minutes throughout the day, 2 to 3 hours a week, you know, where you're doing something that's very different from your job, but you're also doing something that's forcing you to lower cortisol, because that's the hormone that you guys are at the most risk for. And that could be any of the modalities that do that, whether it's walking, running, doing yoga, swimming, doing acupuncture, doing massage, any of those things that force you to relax. So those are probably my strongest tips for that.
Awesome. Love it. And I know you said a really important piece of, this wellness journey is knowing yourself.
Yes.
And you've actually developed a really interesting way to know yourself a little bit more through this idea of power types. So could you talk to us a little bit about the different power types and how you thought of this whole methodology?
Yes, definitely. So again, I have all this different types of training under my belt: Eastern medicine, Chinese, Ayurvedic, nutrition, and then at the same time I'm doing conventional Western medicine labs in our office. So I'm looking at hormone levels, I'm looking at nutrient levels, I'm getting real data, to match kind of what I'm seeing with the other diagnostic systems. And one of the things I learned, I continue as I sit with women in particular, even men. There's probably a book for men coming soon, but for women in particular, what I've noticed is, again, this loss of what to do. They don't have a roadmap, they don't have a plan, and that's the question I get asked over and over again. Like, it's classic, they'll bring a bag of supplements or they'll bring 5 books or whatever, like, I don't know what to do, please tell me what to do. And so we're all different, right? We're all unique, we're all individual, but as I was talking to women, and I'm about 12,000 women in over the last decade of seeing patients, and you listen to them and you're hearing their stories and then you're interpreting data, the patterns started to line up, and so somebody who had this medical condition and this hormone imbalance was also this Ayurvedic type, this Chinese medicine meridian imbalance, this nutritional deficiency over here, and I could start to see them at a certain point in the practice, and then I started to track them, and I started to write them down, and when you start to write them down and track them, then you're like, oh my gosh, there's something here. We would have this powerful prescriptive formula for empowerment, really, to help us all feel amazing if we use the tools of both and merge them together, and we'd be able to understand, okay, this is why I do this is why I need to eat this way. So that's how the whole concept of power typing began. So it started with a bunch of spreadsheets, probably Google spreadsheets.
I was going to
say Google sheets. Yeah, used lots of Google spreadsheets and entered a lot of data just to track what was happening. And then as I developed the 5 types, so these are 5 power types, and they each have a distinct way that they need to eat, they need to move, their personalities tie into it, their emotional tendencies tie into that as well. There are supplements that they might need, their hormone imbalances. And so as I developed them, then the next step was to name them. And so the names, again, I've stolen literally from Eastern systems of medicine. So the 5 power types, just to review them real quickly, the first one is the Gypsy girl, and the Gypsy's my creative, super creative. Some of you may be Gypsies, but have that Vata energy from Ayurvedic medicine, have that sort of adrenal issue where they're more likely to go into adrenal fatigue, have anxiety, those type of things. So there's a whole, set of issues that are both pros and cons that come with being a Gypsy. The second one is the boss lady, and that's your high achiever. That's your go-getter, your commander. The boss lady is amazing. We have a lot of boss ladies we know, and apparently there are a lot of boss ladies, that are very high-achieving women at work. But the biggest problem there, in Ayurveda, they're more pitta, and they hold all their stress in their digestive system. So the first thing to go for a boss lady is usually something with their gut. So IBS, constipation, reflux, you name it. But then that goes on, and this is where modern science intersects. We know that all inflammation today begins in the gut. We know that in science. We're seeing that when we do research on the microbiome and all that other good stuff. Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine had already talked about that. So again, if you knew this ahead of time, if you knew you're a boss lady and you know that you're going to hold your stress in your digestive system, then all the more important to be on the right diet for you to protect against inflammation, to protect against those autoimmune diseases and things like that. The next one is a blend, and that's what both of us are. We're both savvy chicks, and that's a blend of the Gypsy and the boss lady, so part creative, part go-getter. So at times we're probably lost somewhere in space, and at other times we're like, go, 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 right? so it's the blend, but then you have the medical issues of both and the hormone patterns of both and the nutritional needs of both. I think after that was the Earth Mama, and the Earth Mama is the nurturer. I always say it's the person that's like the center of a home and the center of a family. You guys probably know an Earth Mama around you or within your own families, but they are the worst about establishing boundaries and really attending to their own needs. They're usually worried about everybody else, and they define themselves really through everybody else. But there's a medical consequence to that, and that's what we find with Earth Mamas. They often have issues with insulin resistance, resistance, with diabetes, with hypertension, more cardiometabolic type issues. They're the ones the most likely to get depressed because, again, they don't have their own like foundation and self-worth. So that's the Earth Mama. And then the last one is the Nightingale. And the Nightingale is that mission-oriented, service-focused person who just is about a higher calling and a higher cause, but again, to the point that they sacrifice themselves. And so they may be your friend that's on mission trips constantly, and then it turns around that they're getting like pneumonia and bronchitis and like all these different illnesses over and over again. It typically taxes their immune system. You know, that's the first thing that goes for them. So, you know, for them, I've had a lot of Nightingales in practice as well, and it's always reminding them that the mission is important, but the mission is only as good as they are, right? So they've got to take the time to rebuild their immune system. And again, there's a diet that matches that. There's supplements that match that. There's a certain way they should move. They should not be running and doing marathons and all that other stuff when they're in that Nightingale phase. So, you know, it's fascinating to help women understand who they are, see them do the plan, and then see them make changes. And then the other important thing, though, is as women in particular, at any given time, we may be any one of those power types. We're going to shift. We're hormonal creatures, so we're going to shift. We may have a phase of our lives where we're full-on boss ladies, right? But then we may switch and have a phase where we're the Earth Mama, or have a later phase where we're the Nightingale. All of that's irrelevant, right? It's more important for you just to connect to who you are at any given phase so that you understand how to take care of yourself at that phase. So many people, when I first came out with this, was, well, what's better? Which is the best one? Which is like the best one to be? I'm like, they're all good. Every single one is good. It's just the point of this was to understand who you are and really put some thought into, hey, this is who I am, and therefore this is my roadmap. And then once you have that roadmap, for me, what I really wanted in writing this particular book and developing the Power Type formula is I wanted anyone who touched it and picked it up to begin that conversation with themselves, to begin to understand themselves. You know, I'm not saying I have all the answers in there for every aspect of their health, but I sure do have a way for them to at least begin that road and that journey so that you don't waste 5 or 6 years like I did, like feeling bad about yourself, not like going for it or doing everything you're supposed to do. You know, you really are just full-fledged ahead being the superwoman you're supposed to be. And I firmly believe that.
Yeah, I love it. And you got the Superwoman title from your daughter, right?
Yes. So this was a fun story. So, you know, I had this concept already in my head of types of women and, you know, was tracking and doing all that other stuff. And I think it was, we were on a car ride with my daughter. We had just come from an event where a lot of women had come up to me that we know and had been making comments, and she was with me. And we get in the car and we're driving, and she's like, Mom, you need to write a book for women. And I'm like, I do? And she's like, yeah, you need to write a book. I go, well, what would you write? What would you call it? You know? And she's such an old soul, but she's like, you need to write a book called Superwoman, because you're a superwoman. I feel like every woman I meet is always talking about how you're a superwoman, so maybe you need to help everybody else be a superwoman, because I just see you as Mom, you know? So anyhow, so she actually came up with the title. I'm like, you're right, that's a really great idea. So we called the book the SuperWoman Rx, and I dedicated the book to her because it is her idea and her title, and then she helped me actually too with the power type names as well. And she took the test. She was only 8, I think, when I started the concept.
Wow.
And she was 9, almost 10 when the book was published, but she still goes in and takes the test. I'm like, half these questions aren't relevant to you. She's like, it's okay, I already figured it out. I'm a gypsy. It's hilarious, but yeah,
awesome.
She's a cutie.
I love it. I love it. So we're at Google, right? We're all about technology and the digital world. How do you think about digital technology and how it integrates with medicine today, or even the things that you do on a daily basis, or your practice, or how you help women?
How much time do you have?
No. 5 minutes.
Well, no. So, you know, I am the biggest technological idiot you've ever met in your life. So my tech support when I was like 21 was my 9-year-old sister. So I never thought I'd have to spend this much time thinking about technology, but it is a reality of today, and it has absolutely impacted our business. It's impacted the practice. It's impacting patient care, quite honestly. So technology is a must, and I have forcefully had to immerse myself in that world and try to understand, you know, how this piece of the equation fits into what I'm doing. And here's what I think. I think that technology is amazing. We need technology to track our data, to track our numbers, to help remind us of habits and behaviors, and to help with resources. We absolutely need technology for that. And I think one of the limitations that even I'm experiencing with this type of medicine that we're doing is that, there's not a central place to get this information, right?
Yeah.
It's not coming out. So a lot of it's having to come out of my mouth or something that I write. It would be amazing to have this stuff available in real time for women so they understand, okay, I just told you you're a gypsy girl, now go figure out, here are all the other resources you need, and we continually update it. So I know that there's a need for that type of technology that is resourceful, data tracking, motivating, educational. There's that. From a practice standpoint, what we have noticed, and we're actually developing our own platform because it's such an issue, is that to do the medicine that I'm doing, there's not the technology out there. So it slows me down from a practice standpoint and it prevents my growth. So for medicine to really move forward, we've got to have systems that integrate all the information, right? That put all the information together, and really help patients with the full picture of their health. I defined wellness for you earlier. Well, that technology needs to match that definition, and it needs to be able to show people this is the cumulative additive properties of your health. This is what your wellness looks like, and it's taking all of that into account. And then from a operational standpoint with a practice and with a business, it needs to mirror that as well.
Right.
So that's where we are. We're trying to develop a platform so that we can then take this medicine, make it more efficient, make it scalable, and then allow it to grow beyond just Atlanta, the few centers that we have in Atlanta, and be able to grow beyond so that women everywhere can have access to it. And then same thing with, the SuperWoman theory. We want technology there so that women can continue to grow in that process of having that conversation with themselves and understanding who they are. Because, I love the books, I love writing, but not that many people read anymore, right? So they want quicker information. They want to download it faster. So the book is a great foundational step, but the next step is probably technology.
Absolutely. Super interesting. And I know you mentioned this idea of expansion.
Yes.
So what's next for you, for the center? What are you most excited about in the next 6 to 12 months, maybe in your personal life, center space, but also in the medical world? What excites you and gets you out of bed every morning?
Oh my gosh, there's so much. I think that in the medical world, it's fascinating to continue to watch the intersection of genetics, food and nutrition, and all these other data points that we've been talking about for years, how they intersect and are really redefining what prevention is and redefining what healthy is. So the conventional world needs some time to catch up, but what's super exciting is seeing the integrative worlds and the functional medicine worlds really start to gain their spot, and really start to come into the forefront and lead some of these conversations on what prevention really means, what does healthy really mean, and for the longest time there was just a one-line or flat definition of that. I think the other thing that gets me out of bed in the morning, just from a medical standpoint, is I'm a huge believer in family wellness. I've lived in a situation where the family was not well, and the center of that family is always the woman. So that's why I decided to start with women, because when the woman is not healthy, it reverberates out into her children, her husband, her extended family, her community, her city. And so I think it's so important to shift culture. We have to create strong families, and we have to create really unified, healthy families, and it starts with the woman. So what gets me excited and challenged, quite honestly, is understanding that when it comes to women's health, there are miles and miles and miles of work to do, journeys to travel, because we historically have gaslit women's health issues. Women's health issues were always brushed to the side because it was a male-dominated field when Western medicine was born. So to really change what's happening within a family, I've got to change what's happening with women. And if I can change what's happening with women, then I can turn around and impact that family. So that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, is knowing that that's sort of the framework from which I'm functioning. And I love it. And to this day, there's not a day that I walk into my practice and I don't learn something, or I speak and I don't learn something from somebody I meet. And it's just such a fascinating journey. As far as the practice goes, and as far as I go, we're just going to continue to grow and scale and expand. We're trying to, again, use technology to make this old way of doing things better and more efficient, right? Because we're now in a culture that, we can't sit and talk for, 2 hours about something. So how do we take this old system of medicine, integrate it with the newer modern medicine, but then at the same time preserve the character, the flavor, but also make it efficient and run the way it's supposed to run. So that's our challenge. So that keeps me going in the center, and technology is a big part of that conversation. So 6 to 12 months from now, I hope that we have our technology wrapped. I hope that we are opening and launching maybe here in New York and LA and other places around the country. And as far as I go, I hope I continue to do the work that needs to be done to get this message out louder and louder.
Well, that's amazing. What a great mission. And we're here to help and support. So we'll open up the floor for questions.
You know, as you're talking, it makes me think a lot about the sort of obesity epidemic in this country.
Yes.
And how, you know, I'm just wondering, you know, where does that all connect in here, and how do you think about bringing that to folks who probably need it?
That's such a great
more than maybe some of us or some others. Perhaps.
Definitely. I mean, I think the obesity epidemic has happened for a number of different reasons. Probably the number one reason is honestly our food sourcing and the production of our food. The more and more we dig into obesity, we're understanding that a lot of what was used over the last 30, 40 years between additives and fillers and preservatives and things like that have been hormone disruptors and have contributed to that conversation. So when it comes to obesity, again, if we can educate a family on the right way to eat in a way that's not, you know, everyone has this sort of preconceived notion that eating healthy is expensive, right? So if we can help families learn to navigate that terrain so they understand how to make healthy choices, and again, it usually starts with the woman, right? Because the woman's doing the cooking, the shopping, the buying. So the more empowered you can make the woman of the family, typically it'll go out into the children and into the other adults of the family to help with the obesity crisis. We just are also a culture of overconsumption, quite honestly. You know, we're eating way more than we need to eat, and that goes to our children, and it goes to us as adults as well. So helping people understand what normal consumption is, I think, is a big part of it, and that's where the whole conversation on food waste also comes up, right? Because we waste so much food too. So the obesity conversation, I know there's been a huge spotlight with movement and activity. I'm going to push back on that and say it's honestly 80% food and it's only 20% activity. And I think that's where maybe we have the conversation wrong to a certain extent. You know, I do also think that technology is an issue for obesity in the future. You know, how are we going to take this tool, this amazing tool that we have of being connected to anyone, anywhere in the world, and get information at any given moment, but at the same time create some boundaries and parameters so that people are using it in a way that is productive and proactive and not working against them. So the biggest thing I've seen in pediatrics, you know, which is another one of my medical loves, so to speak, but is that children don't have the boundaries to navigate technology, and adults don't have the education to help them navigate those boundaries. And again, as much as I know, I've struggled with that with my two children, you know, and what's normal, what's not normal, what's okay. So I think technology, I think food first. I think our food is the biggest problem. I think looking at technology and looking at how children are trapped in rooms a lot of the times, they're not outside. I think the overscheduling of families is an issue too. I mean, all of these things are factors that play into obesity for sure. And then, you know, when it comes to different socioeconomic groups, you know, helping them with food deserts in areas that aren't getting high quality food. I mean, there's so many, I could talk forever on this, and I'll probably need to stop, but there's so many great studies. Like if you give a young child any socioeconomic status, if you give them salads and healthy vegetables and all that other stuff, they will continue to choose that. But the minute you introduce like a high salt, high fat food, their palate changes, you know. And when they did a study comparing lower socioeconomic kids and their parents and giving them food choices, the kids actually chose the healthier foods. The parents had been so acclimated to a certain taste that they chose the junkier foods, you know. So a lot of palate training is happening, you know. There's a lot that needs to take place there. So I think it's education again. I think it's change. It's got to be change in our industry and our food processing, and then creating environments where children can thrive and adults can thrive as well.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
What's your view on sugar? That's another hot topic.
So sugar is probably maybe the number one culprit.
Yeah.
If you have to, sugar and salt, I think those are the two things, and all the different forms of it, right?
Yeah.
So high fructose corn syrup, you know, all the different sweeteners and fillers and Splenda and all that other stuff is probably the number one thing. There is sugar in everything. So sugar is probably one of the biggest culprits for the obesity crisis, I think. And when you go back and look at food manufacturing and you look at what changed, there are a couple of things that changed, 30 to 40 years ago. The amount of sugar and sweeteners is one of them. The amount of additives and salt is another. The third is the use of certain pesticides and chemicals in our food manufacturing. Those are probably your three biggest changes.
And I go into a grocery store, and sometimes I'm like, should I get organic? Should I not get organic? Should I get this type, that type? What are your tips, or what do you do when you go food shopping?
So what we do, we're majority organic, but I know that that's hard to sustain and it's hard to maintain. But I think it's, again, the dirtiest foods, right? The dirty dozen that's on the EWG. If you want, it's the Environmental Working Groups list. If you want to familiarize yourself, those are worth buying organic. But here's the challenge, even people that are eating organic and buying organic, there's so much cross-contamination that you're still getting exposed to different chemicals, different pesticides, different things. So again, that's why being proactive and being in the sort of integrative functional space, I think, is so critical. Because it's hard to control your environment. Even when you're being so conscious and so careful and so deliberate about your choices, sometimes it's very difficult just to control the environment. And our needs are different than what they were. We had an infectious disease problem maybe 50 years ago. We had different medical issues. The medical issues of tomorrow are going to be environmentally induced. They're going to be toxicity issues. They're going to be diseases of inflammation. Those are the diseases of today and tomorrow. That's why cancer's on the rise. That's why autoimmune disease is on the rise. So it's just so hard to navigate the space that I think that the more you know what your body chemistry is doing and you're being as proactive as you can to support it, you're going to have a better sort of outcome all the way through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Super, super interesting. I think we had a question. Yes.
Awesome.
First, thank you so much for being here. I read the book and loved it. And what I really loved is that you made it so accessible for someone who doesn't have a medical background. And I would love to hear any tips or recommendations you have, given there's just so much information out there on health and wellness and medicine. And you even mentioned with, being a doctor and having the medical background, being disconnected from some of that. So any recommendations you have, just like navigating the noise and knowing what's a credible source and where we should spend our time?
Definitely. I think that's probably the hardest part, right? So is trying to find the information that you can rely on. I think your first step is to find a medical provider that you can have these conversations with, quite honestly. I think there's a lot of noise in the wellness space, so again, not that I'm trying to, toot our own horns, but turning to the integrative and functional community where there's so many great providers coming along, and they have worked really hard at getting the conventional training, but also getting the training on the other side, so to speak, and understanding where those worlds intersect. I think that's probably your most efficient way of going about it, because after that, if you're trying to navigate I read this article over here and it said to take this, and I did this over here and it said to take that, it's really difficult. It's why I wrote the SuperWoman Rx, honestly, because I know that they're not integrative and functional medicine providers everywhere, but at least that's a start. At least if you can understand, and even in the book, remember, there are labs for you to check, there's all that information for you to advocate for yourself, when you walk into the doctor's office. But I still firmly believe in as many different types of providers as there are in the health and wellness space. I still really believe that the physician has to sit at that table and has to help direct those decisions, because the physician ultimately has the breadth and depth of understanding of how one decision will play into another and what sort of all of that relationship is. So I think finding a strong provider who can help you navigate information will be helpful. And then once you get the main ideas, this is you understand you, then do your digging and your research and anything else you want to do, and read other books to gain information under that main idea. It's almost like writing a chapter, right? Come out with that main thesis about yourself, and then underneath that you can develop things out more, because you may then find things that particular provider or doctor didn't know, and that's okay. It's just digging deeper. But the confusion comes when, do I need to eat for my adrenals, or do I need to eat for insulin, or do I need to go paleo or vegan or gluten-free? That's where the confusion starts and gets so frustrating to navigate.
Yeah, great question.
This is kind of following up to that, but I think you're in the unique position of having both Western and Eastern medical background and training. what do you see as the future of sort of scaling these Eastern medical practices across Western medicine across the country when so many people it's not widely accepted, as you said, and it might not be easy for everyone or as accessible to find someone who's trained in both Eastern and medical, and if someone isn't sure where to start with their own Eastern medical research and how to apply it to Western, what do you see as the future or the best way to go about that?
So the future of the industry, if you're asking about that first, of merging Eastern and Western medicine is my passion. I really feel like it's my purpose. How do we get this out there? How do we get it in the hands of more people? Mm-hmm. And there are different ways to do that. And there are different ways to bring it into medicine and change the medical model. So there are many of us, I'm not the only one, but there are many of us who want to change the medical model and want to see it more accessible to more folks. So I think that is a definite goal and something that you asked me earlier, what gets me out of bed in the morning. I think that's something that sort of motivates me. For you, that's worthless, right? Because you're like, okay, great, you're gonna work on this for the next 20 years. So meanwhile, I have to live the next 20 years. So for you, I think it's again pulling together as many different resources from the two systems, or finding providers like me. There are others like me that do consults. Sometimes you don't have to be necessarily here in the city. They're remote or things like that help provide you at least foundational framework for doing that. And again, the intention of the book was to do that for you, to help you begin that conversation. And then again, underneath that, once you understand who you are and what your needs are, go ahead and get the opinions from a Chinese medicine practitioner, from an Ayurvedic practitioner, from your doctor, and merge that information together. But ultimately, you want to find someone to guide you through that process, because it can get very overwhelming and confusing to get information from so many different places. So I think it's read the book and see if that helps you. I would say, try to find a practitioner that is well-versed in both to give you some guidance and direction, and then begin your journey of exploring different aspects of your health so that you can start to put some of that information together for you.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I had a quick question about how you approach the conversation with older generations. I think with parents and grandparents, sometimes it can be harder to have these types of conversations, and the education background, they're not as open to, changing habits or a lifestyle. Have you had older clients or can talk through experiences where you've approached it with parents or grandparents that have been successful, or any tips for that?
Yeah, what a great question. I've experienced this one personally, for sure. We do have older patients that come to the practice, but they're typically more engaged, right? They've already done a little bit of digging and research, so they're a little bit more open. Now, and within our own family, my dad doesn't listen to anything I say, and he'll say, okay, sweetheart, I'll do that, and I'm sure he doesn't do any of it. So they're tougher, because they come from the generation of the doctor was right, I'm going to do what the doctor said, and pharma is best. That's their generation, right? So they believe, and their medicine is transactional. You go to the doctor, you get a script in your hand, that visit is now complete. If you did not get a script in your hand, there's no point to the visit. So that's the generation that they came from. So it's much more challenging. So the best way to start is 2 or 3 things I've noticed, hey, why don't you just try doing these 2 things and not give them too much information. I've actually seen the reverse works. Somebody our age or younger, they want the information. They want to understand how everything connects. They want to be empowered and an advocate. The older generation doesn't want all that. They don't care about the connection and the big words like inflammation and oxidative stress. They're not interested in any of that. All they want to know is almost that same transactional language. Your joints hurt, try this, and then you give them 2 things to do. And then you follow back up, maybe give them 2 weeks, and see if after 2 weeks they were able to put those 2 things into effect. So I would think, transactional is the only word that comes to my mind, but simple commands. This hurts, do this. That's not working, try this, do this. I've noticed that anytime I sit with my mother-in-law, my mom, or my dad, any of them, and they're all so different in their personalities, but essentially the conversation always goes the same way. Anytime I try to connect the dots, put the pieces of their health together, explain all of this, I lose them. So don't do that. Just be very simple and be very direct and see if they feel better. And oftentimes they'll get results, and then that motivates them to move on to step 2 or to step 3. So try that.
Coming for you, Grandma.
I know. Tough
Awesome.
crowd.
Yeah, go for it.
I have a question on just technology again. So there are like so many apps now that like can track your steps or your workouts or calories or turn down the blue light on your screen after a certain time, right? There's like all these different things. So I guess, do you have any advice to maybe people in this room who may be designing apps like these, or for the rest of us who use all of these things, like how to navigate it, how to design better, how to incorporate like a holistic thing? Because I think right now it gives like almost a false sense of control. Yeah, like, oh, well, like my phone told me to stand up today, so like I'm great, like I'm done on the fitness like journey.
That's such a great question, and I have seen that. People rely on their data. They come in the room and they're like, well, let me show you. I know I'm getting REM sleep because my sleep tracker said I'm getting REM sleep. I'm like, why is your sleep tracker in your room? But anyhow, I see that all the time. It's good and bad. It's not all either direction. It's good because you're getting data, you're getting information, you're getting sort of an initial look at what you're doing, but it's bad because it's not the whole picture, right? That's the bad part. So I think anyone who's designing, anytime they can design, and I challenge myself with this too, anytime you can design to where you're trying to bring in the whole picture in some form or fashion. If you're designing a sleep tracker, well, maybe ask a few more questions around sleep. Just because they checked off on they got this many hours of REM sleep does not necessarily mean that they're healthy or that all that sleep quality was good. So it may be, working with somebody who has sort of this well-rounded approach who can bring more of the whole picture into any of these, and then taking some of these folks who are using data and using apps through workflows, that if this is happening, then you may want to consider this, this, and this. Not turning into a doctor's office necessarily, but hey, have a conversation with your doctor. You might want to get your labs checked, or you may need to drink more water, whatever it is. But having that more well-rounded approach, where rather than just fixating on one or two data points, is going to help the patient on the other end of that be more successful in the long run. Yeah. So I don't know if that was helpful.
Yeah. No, it is interesting because there are so many different apps,
right now.
Just because you hit your steps doesn't mean that you're healthy
right.
at all.
Yeah. It's a great way to check in with yourself.
Yeah.
But it's not accomplishing like, who am I? What are my main needs? What do I need to build under that main idea?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I know you went over it in the book, but if I was going to go get a blood test tomorrow, what would be the 2 or 3 top signals that I should be looking for?
So, I can answer that very easily. I think the number one thing we're not checking for routinely, which every doctor should be checking every patient for, are inflammation markers. Okay. They're easy to do. They're covered by insurance, but checking like a CRP, ESR, which is a SED rate, and a homocysteine. Those 3 things you should be doing every 6 months, because to me, those are the earliest warnings that something is wrong with your body and something's not quite right, and then the investigative work can come after that. So that's one. For women, I think it's so critical to look at your hormone levels. I talk about this all throughout the book, looking at estrogen, progesterone, thyroid, the derivatives of those hormones, because then it tells us what your body's doing with them. And you want to do them periodically, because you want to track it. Speaking of data, you want to be able to track it, because what's normal for you is not normal for me. So, you might feel really good at a TSH of 2, but I feel good at a TSH of 1, so when 5 years from now you have a baby or something happens and your TSH shifts and you're quote unquote normal by the conventional range, but you feel like crap, then we can go look back and say, oh no, that's not where your TSH needs to be for you. So I think, tracking this data, tracking these labs, that's the beauty of technology, is tracking it over the course of your lifespan and knowing where you felt great, where you didn't feel so good. Yeah. And it also helps you later when you guys enter sort of the anti-aging or kind of the more prevention conversation, because then we know where to correct you back to as well,
Totally. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Fun.
I know we're all really excited, so give an applause for Dr. Taz. Yeah.